Hello, everybody, and welcome to our .org Solutions webinar for today. Happy 2/22/22. Hope everybody's having a great day. It's hard to believe that it's been a couple months since we did our last webinar, but we're just really glad to be back doing this and hope that we can continue to provide more content for you in our coffee shop format. So I'm just going to give everybody about 30 more seconds, I think, to log on here. And I see a lot of people are logging on at this point. And then we're going to go ahead and get started. So give everybody about a minute. In the meantime, as we're kind of waiting for everybody to log on, if you could just do a quick wave in the chat to let us know that you can hear us and see us okay. Great, thank you so much. That's always helpful. Okay, well, it looks like we have quite a few people logged on already, and it sounds like everybody can hear us. So we're going to go ahead and get started for those of you who were here at 2 o'clock. So if you are here to see planning for your strategic plan, you are in the right place today. And to do a quick introduction, there's some of you who I probably do not know, so I'll introduce myself today. My name is Amy Wong, and I'm the president of .org Solutions. I have more than 30 years of experience in the nonprofit fundraising and marketing field, and also in nonprofit operations and small business operations. I founded .org in 2009 after working in the nonprofit sector for about 17 years. I do a lot of speaking engagements, writing, presenting, and all sorts of things on a variety of things regarding both the nonprofit sector and small business and leadership. My background is I have a BS in journalism from Bowling Green State University, go Falcons. And I'm also a graduate of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program. So in addition to having a lot of years of experience in specifically in marketing and fundraising, done a lot of work in strategic planning, not just for our company here at .org, but for other organizations in the nonprofit sector. So for those of you who are new to our coffee shop is actually part of our .org Cafe Professional Development Series. It's a free series of different types of content that we provide to people in the nonprofit sector. Coffee Shop is specifically our webinar series, and you are only going to see panelists on the call. So actually, I am the panelist today because we're taking a little bit of a different approach today. For veterans of our coffee shop, you'll know that we kind of do this a variety of ways. Sometimes we do a presentation and sometimes we have guest speakers. Today is actually going to be a presentation format. All participants are going to be muted, and I'm not going to be able to see you, but hopefully you'll continue to see me. And I want to make sure that you look at this as an interactive opportunity. So we want to encourage questions throughout the presentation. We'll also leave time for Q&A at the end. And I do want to thank the people who ahead of time provided us with some questions. I am going to save those to the end. Hopefully we will be able to address all of those questions that you provided ahead of time. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So, you know, is it time? You know, a lot of people are talking right now about, is this time to do a strategic plan? And I'm going to say yes. And I think that, you know, there's some really great statistics and studies that have been done over the years. And the one I found that I think is completed in 2014, but what I liked about it is I think it's relevant all the time. And it stated that nonprofit organizations who engaged in strategic planning are more likely to deliver a distinctive impact on their communities and more likely to have greater sustainability and stability of funding. And so I truly believe that, because anybody who actually has solid plans in place is going to have the best chance at success because they have a guide to set them forward. So, you know, I think it's definitely the time to be involved in strategic planning. I think the pandemic really forced all organizations, nonprofit organizations, and even for-profit organizations to think strategically, because the pandemic was something that none of us have ever gone through before and continue to go through, though it seems like there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. I think it created for nonprofits specifically a more strategic mindset where the board and leadership had to work together. And this is a great time to be able to leverage that. It also kind of, I think, the pandemic really exposed a lot of gaps. So it exposed gaps, whether it's in, staffing or leadership or service delivery, it's your systems. Were you prepared? Were there things that you needed to do? Things you're thinking, like, gosh, I wish we would have known 3-5 years ago that we might have had to do something like this. Oops, sorry about that. And then it also it had people do a lot of innovative thinking. So, new services had to be created, staffing models had to be created. Who knew that, hybrid and remote work were going to be something that was going to be really important to all of us, and that we weren't going to be going back to the offices on a regular basis. I think now we're starting to understand, though, some of these ebbs and flows of what for a while was a very unsettled world. And though there are still things like supply chain issues, and we're starting to see a lot with inflation, and there are going to be challenges that I think are going to be things that we can't even imagine. We're starting to maybe be a little bit more adaptable to some of those ebbs and flows. So, being able to think strategically requires the ability to think about things that we don't even know. And then I also think strategic plans, though they are strategic and they're visionary, they also create a little bit of structure for you, so that it gives us all something that we can look forward to. So as we get started, I want to talk about what is it that we're going to be going over today. So we're going to talk some really base level stuff, and really the whole point of this session is to, how do you start thinking? If you're thinking right now about, am I going to do a strategic plan? Do I want, does our organization need it? I don't even know where to start. Where do I start? So that's really what this session today is about. And we're going to be building over the next couple of months with other sessions that are going to really dive into these topics a little bit more in depth. So we're going to talk about what is a strategic plan. I think it's an important place to start. We're going to talk about why you need it, what is included, who is included, and then what are some different ways that you can facilitate the process. So this is really, again, about getting you ready for your strategic plan. So defining a strategic plan seems like it should be pretty basic, but as I was doing a lot of research, I found that there were, in talking with people too, as I think there was a lot of different feelings on what really is just a strategic plan. And I think if you are a nonprofit leader, you may be going to your board and saying, we need to go for a strategic plan, and the strategic plan for a company may be different than it is for a nonprofit. Whereas maybe you're a board member and you want to go to the leadership of your nonprofit organization, and maybe it's something they don't have experience with. So being able to give them a really good explanation of what a strategic plan really is going to be important. So the things that I think that a strategic plan are, first of all, I think it's a bridge between your annual goals and your long-range vision. So it's really a way to kind of link your mission and your values and where you aspire to be as an organization with the things that you need to do and get done every day to just actually exist as your nonprofit. The strategic plan actually says, oh, vision, hey, we want to find ways that we can get to what we aspire to be, and how do we put that in what we're doing every day so that it doesn't overload our staff, so that we're still able to get the other things done and still serve our mission. It's also a guide to document your goals, objectives, and tactics. And even though that's something you may have as part of your annual plans, and if you don't, you should, it really takes those longer term goals of maybe 3 years. When I say a strategic plan, I'm thinking nowadays it's about 3 years is a good length for a strategic plan. It documents those specific goals, and it documents the things that you're going to do to achieve those goals, and then how you're going to do it. It's definitely a living, breathing document. I think that one of the worst things that organizations can do is actually spend all this time investing and putting together a strategic plan, and then it kind of goes on the shelf, or it's something that even when something like a pandemic or even something like a natural disaster or other thing would happen, where people say, no, we have to hold true to the strategic plan. So being able to say that it's a living, breathing document that may have to change over the course of time. I'm not saying change it all the time, but you need to be able to do that and be able to adapt. And then also you have to look at it as a process with achievement in mind. So meaning that is that a strategic plan, is because it's over a longer term, sometimes it's harder to achieve because there might not be a process involved. So, it is something that you got to make sure that when you're putting together the strategic plan, that you really have an end goal in mind and items that you can measure for success along the way. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So why do you need a strategic plan? As I mentioned, a strategic plan is really that bridge between your annual plans and your long range vision. And I think what it really does for me is it actually makes that long range vision realistic, because it takes elements of that vision and it allows you to break that down so that you can really understand it a little bit better. It also guides your growth. I think that growth is very hard for a lot of organizations, especially smaller nonprofits, because growth to you could be like, we can't handle anymore, and we just don't have the capacity, or we don't have the time, but we know we can serve more people. It actually helps guide that growth and do it in a measured way that you can do over a couple of years, and again, something that you could measure. It also helps align your vision with your current initiatives. And I think this is where a lot of organizations really kind of get caught off guard, is that the strategic plan is separated from the annual goals, and it's certain responsibility of one team and not of the other. When it all works together and it aligns all of those current initiatives with what you're aspiring to be, you're going to have a much better chance of success. And again, that's something we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. And I also think it helps you exit the laundry cycle. So I feel like, I don't even think it's just nonprofits. I think businesses in general often will fall into what I call the laundry cycle. It's kind of like you wash, rinse, dry, and repeat. And I think that's what happens when you get into an annual cycle of things. It's that certain times of year you get used to as an organization of those ebbs and flows. And you kind of get, especially organizations that have a lot of longevity within them and a lot of people who have worked for them for a long time, you get kind of stuck in a rut, or you get stuck in that laundry cycle. A strategic plan kind of changes that a little bit. It helps you actually think a little bit differently than what you're doing on an annual basis. And it pushes your people to get out of their comfort zone and maybe think a little bit differently about how they're doing their jobs and how they're serving the people that you want to serve. And I also think it gives your team some structure and focus. And I think this goes back to the laundry cycle as well, is that sometimes different teams get so stuck in a rut or stuck in that cycle that, they really don't have focus on maybe a particular initiative that may be better. And so, your team will get more structure by having a strategic plan and aligning that plan with the annual plan. Forces your team and also your board to think bigger. And we'll talk about how we involve different groups within your organization in your strategic planning process. But I think that every organization needs to aspire to something, whether it's to be bigger, maybe it's to be smaller, maybe it's to serve more people, maybe it's to serve a different population. I think whenever you have a leadership and organizations that are aspiring to do something different, then you can get those people on board, then your organization is going to continue to be sustainable, evolve, and relevant. So what are some things that you include in a strategic plan? There's probably a lot of different philosophies on this, but I have 4 different things that I think are the best to be included in the plan. So the first thing that you want to include is our goals. And obviously we want to have goals that are measurable. We'll talk about that in a minute. You want to have an accountability structure. You want to have deadlines. Obviously, it's great to have deadlines. It's amazing how people work when they know that they have a specific deadline they need to meet. And then you also need to be able to measure the success. So let's talk about goals for a minute. So I'm sure most of you have probably heard of SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Excuse me for just a second. I need to sorry about that. So SMART goals, which are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. They really have clear and defined metrics so that everyone understands what they are. SMART goals show your organization kind of where you want to go and how you will get there and by when. So you want to have SMART goals. You also want to have shared goals. This is, I think, one of the most critical things is that the strategic plan is everybody's plan. It's everybody's thing to be, embracing and proud of. Different people will obviously have different responsibilities within the plan. You might have people in your organization that have no responsibilities at all in terms of leading or guiding a component of the plan. But everyone needs to understand that these goals are shared and that unless you're moving together as a team, you're not going to be able to get to success. And they have to be integrated goals into your annual plan. So however you have your goal structure set up within your annual plans that you put together as an organization, you need to take those strategic goals and include them and use that document again as a living, breathing document. So let's talk about accountability. This is one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to enacting plans and putting them into work. Having that accountability structure and that ownership structure for your plan is the only way that your plan is going to get accomplished. And that plan's ownership, as I've mentioned a couple of times, is not just the responsibility of management. It's not just the responsibility of the board. It's everyone's responsibility. And ultimately, everyone within your organization needs to see how they fit into that plan. So the goal is to really create momentum. It's to have everybody understand why the plan should be important to them. And then it's also something that you as an as leaders, maybe within the organization or board members, need to figure out is, how do you get people to embrace this particular plan? So by doing that, you have to define responsibilities. So, maybe you have different leaders that are going to be responsible for a particular part of the plan. So maybe you have a building project that is coming your way. So that building project is obviously, you have to have a specific team with expertise. So that might be, part of your a board committee that have members on that building committee that have expertise in working with contractors and permitting and architects and things like that. Maybe you have a person who is like your main receptionist within your organization. Well, maybe that person needs to be on this building committee as well, because they're the ones that are greeting visitors and they understand maybe problems with traffic flow or how people are or are not getting what they need within the current format that you're in. So making sure that you define that responsibility and making sure that the right people are included is critical. That also creates less murkiness later, and it makes accountability easier because if something does go awry, you're actually able to understand maybe where that was or who might be responsible. I also see realistic deadlines when it comes to accountability. I think everybody gets so excited. It's kind of like the beginning of the year. January 1st hit and automatically everybody has resolutions. I think the average resolution has gone off the rails maybe by day 8. They're usually fully gone by, a couple of weeks, 3 weeks later. I think a strategic plan is a little bit like that too, or even our annual plans, is that we get very excited when they first get created and we want to try to do everything then. The problem is that your strategic plan is a 3-year document or is a 3-year vision of where you want to be. So making sure that you're setting realistic deadlines on when you want to accomplish things is going to do a couple different things. It's going to ensure that you do not have that you don't burn people out. It's going to keep them interested, and that also you're going to have some opportunities to celebrate some successes along the way. Along the lines with realistic deadlines is making sure that you're actually regularly measuring where you are with the plan. So similar to how you measure other things within your nonprofit, you're measuring your fundraising goals on a regular basis. You're measuring your different financials on a regular basis to see maybe where you are with cash flow. The same holds true with your strategic plan. You want to make sure that you're looking to see, yes, maybe we're getting things done, but are we on track? Is this working out the way we want it to work out? So make sure that you're regularly measuring and create a dashboard to help you make sure that you can look at it, you can share it with your board, you can share it with your team. And then clarity. Nobody likes a murky plan. Everyone wants to know what their role is, how they're defined, how they are a part of it. Do they have to get something done within a specific period of time? You want to make sure that you have, everyone knows who's leading a particular thing. Make sure that every single part of that plan is clear, because as soon as you do that and as soon as you set up that structure, then it's going to be, again, really easy to understand where things are going well, or maybe where things aren't going exactly the way you planned. And it's a lot easier to fix something in month 3 than it is to do it in month 30. So you don't want to derail your whole plan because you didn't have clarity and that people didn't understand their roles, their deadlines, and responsibilities as part of the plan. A couple of examples, actually, I'm going to go back to that slide. A couple of examples, though, I think is good. When I talk about measurement, you might want to think about, measuring by a particular component of the project. So, maybe that is you want to complete a capital or facility expansion by a specific date, and then being able to go backward and figure out strategically how you need to do that. Maybe part of your strategic plan is fundraising growth, and that you want to raise 10% more each year for the next 3 years. So, what does that look like and how do you do that? Because, it's really easy to say 10%, but do you need to increase individual gifts by a certain period? Do you need to, maybe make some changes because you lost a corporate funder or you lost a special event because, the pandemic changed things in terms of special events? With program initiatives, you want to make sure that you're looking at, do you want to serve more people? Do you want to add an advanced version of your program? When's the appropriate time to launch that? And being able to kind of, take those numbers back as well. And then staffing too, to increase staff by a certain percentage. What has to happen in order to be able to get that staff increase? Maybe you want to have a certain number of months of cash on hand in order to be able to support payroll until maybe those particular staff members are able to bill for services or something of that nature. So, making sure that you have those realistic deadlines and kind of assigning good measure metrics to them will really be helpful to you. So who do you include on your team? I have to say, this is probably one of the questions that I get asked a lot, who should be on this committee? Who should be on this team? Politically, what should we do? And I have answers, and I also have a lot of not clear answers on this. So I kind of broke it down into, it depends. Obviously, you want to include what I call your key suspects. So you want to include members of your leadership team, your board, key staff members, and other key constituents. But that's not super clear because you might be like, well, do we include everybody? Do we include some people? Do we, how inclusive do we need to be? I think some ways to break that down. Yes, obviously, every organization probably has some political things that they need to deal with so that they can, obviously appease particular people, or there might be other reasons you need to include people. And by all means, you might not want to, but you have to, and you just do. But I also think there are ways to get around that. I don't think you need to include everyone unless you are maybe a team of 4 people. Maybe your nonprofit only has 4 people. Maybe you should have everybody on that. And maybe you should have your executive committee of your board. But if you're a larger organization, including everyone just for the sake of inclusivity, is actually going to create a lot more problems for you than it's going to help you. So here's what I would suggest. I would suggest making sure that you have a diverse representation of background and thought. That can mean a lot of things, right? So that could mean that if one of your goals is to add a more advanced program of something that you already have, well, maybe in order to do that, you need to do some things to talk to people ahead of time that were in the regular program. And maybe those people need to provide valuable insight on how this would be an effective program at an advanced level and what would need to be done. Maybe it is, if you're doing like a fundraising assessment, and you're trying to increase fundraising, maybe you actually need to, again, do some pre-work and talk to maybe some of your larger donors and your development committee, and some of those people maybe have to be on that. Maybe your organization's merged, and maybe you have two organizations that are coming together. Maybe you need to bring key individuals from key areas on there. Maybe your strategic plan is all about, really doing what you can to bring this merged organization together and move forward. So you may need to bring different representatives to the party from, the finance people from both sides of the organization, the marketing people, the fundraising people, the operations people, program people. You might have to have some larger and longer standing strategic meetings in order to make that possible. I also think it's really important to bring that diverse background and thought. So diversity takes on a lot of different things. So diversity is obviously age, gender, race, ethnicity, and lots of other things that we've talked about for those of us who have, participated in any, DEI work, that, great ideas come out of having diversity of thought and background. And I think sometimes the best strategic plans come out and ideas come from people in places that you would least expect. Also too, so maybe like you may never have thought about, you're thinking obviously your board and your leadership, and those are the people who kind of drive the organization, but there might be partners, key partners may be a part of what you're trying to accomplish as your organization. And bringing them into the mix, maybe not necessarily for your overall sessions, but any kind of pre-discussions before you get into, maybe your actual planning sessions, to get their insight and how they may play a key role is important. And then there might just be different groups at different times. Maybe if you did a strategic plan 3 years ago, that group who may have put together a phenomenal strategic plan for you at one time might not be the right group for you right now. Maybe you have needs now that you didn't have 3 years ago, which I would imagine most organizations probably do. But don't feel as though it has to be exactly the same people that were involved maybe the last time that you did a strategic plan. So, and don't also assume too that people within different levels of the organization have to be involved or not have to be involved. But it is important to make sure that that you get a great range of ideas and perspectives and things. And you might even want to look to also, like, if you have a lot of people coming to you within your organization asking about the same issue, maybe there's something that's caused a lot of angst among your group, or there's a lot of challenges, or it's a question that you always get on your website, or it's a question when you're always getting when you talk to somebody. You maybe have to think about that question and think like, oh gosh, I wonder how we can maybe solve this question. And maybe some of those people need to be on the strategic planning committee. So, I guess the answer is it depends. And you have to do what's right for you at the time that you're putting that plan together. And this is obviously something that and we'll talk about working as facilitator in a minute, but this is something that actually, if you choose to work with a strategic planning facilitator or firm, this is something that they can actually help you with too. So now how do we build and we implement the plan? So, obviously in the time that we have today, we're not going to be able to do go really deeply into formatting and things like that. So we're really going to talk right now about how do you start off strong and really decide what you're going to include in your plan. So obviously you have to look at, first of all, whether you need a completely new plan altogether or that you want to just update the plan you have. And so, a new plan may be necessary right now. You may have completed everything that you wanted to complete since your last strategic plan, and that you really need to kind of have maybe reframe some of your vision. Maybe there's some things that you've gotten close to your vision from your last plan. So you have to decide, do you need to start from scratch and have something completely new? Or there's some things in your strategic plan that, yeah, okay, we're still doing okay with this and we just need to update it. Obviously, that's something that is going to be really important to your organization to decide. That actually will drive some of the other decisions that you're going to have to make. So as I mentioned, a lot of organizations who go and do the strategic planning process actually like to work with an outside firm like ours to facilitate a strategic plan. So you're going to need to decide if you want a facilitator or if you don't want to have a facilitator. And facilitators can do a lot of different things. So the advantages to having a facilitator is that they really can be a very good outside voice of reason. They can be very objective. They can be really good at bringing groups together. They can be really good at maybe picking up group dynamics that maybe wouldn't have been done otherwise, seen otherwise. They can maybe push your group into thinking more strategically and less, a little less, check things off the list and more like what are some bigger ideas and kind of push the thought of both your board and your team. But there are different firms that do things different ways. But the advantage of the outside facilitator is that you as a leader or board can actually be part of the process instead of having to drive the process. And a lot of times that's very freeing and helpful. And plus, facilitators that are working on strategic planning actually have a lot of outside expertise that they understand, nonprofit operations, they understand fundraising, they understand marketing, they understand, really the nonprofit sector, and can bring some different philosophies and experiences, not in just developing your plan, but also, implementing that plan as well. But some organizations, for a variety of reasons, may not want to hire a facilitator for that plan. So sometimes that might be because you have like limited or no budget that you have to work with. Maybe sometimes you have a board member who knows strategic planning really well and is willing to actually facilitate the process for you. Maybe you have some other internal experience. Maybe your strategic plan has kind of come in phases and you've completed phase 1, but you just need to make some adjustments to 2 or 3, or where you had a really solid, in case of pandemic, you had a really solid plan at the beginning of the pandemic. You had to pivot, and maybe now it's time to take on those additional roles. That's a really great time to try to take this on your own. So really, it's a matter of obviously preference and budgets. It's also a matter of where you are in the process. And then some organizations may choose to actually just implement a hybrid model as well, where you're actually using a facilitator to help you with parts of it, and then you're going to go it alone on some other parts. So some may not work that way, but that's something certainly to look at. So I see we have a question. Okay, so the SMART goals. Yes, we will actually put that in the chat for everybody. So we will put that in the chat here in a few minutes. All right, so the next thing you want to look at too is you want to look at implementation needs. And I think a common, as I mentioned before, a common thing that happens is you get very excited about the strategic plan, and then life happens, right? So the regular cadence of the regular year happens. You get different things that you that take you off the rails. Maybe your board changes and the people who are the champions for the strategic plan might not be there anymore. Making sure that you understand what your implementation needs are is a good thing to have up front, because you may know that because of your small team or because of your board makeup or for whatever reason, or just job responsibilities, is that you may actually need help with implementing. You might need implementation strategies. So, not only will you maybe need help with the initial plan, but you also might need some help with implementation along the way. And so that's something that you want to keep in mind too, is if you're going to go into the strategic planning process, it is a commitment, but it's also a commitment to implement the plan. And you need to make sure that you either have a strategy or the resources or the energy or all three to be able to get that plan into reality, or it will end up being one of those plans that ends up on the shelf. So budget, I think this is another question that we get a lot too, is how much does it cost to do a strategic plan? So, we've seen numbers starting anywhere from about $5,000 for a very, very, very basic strategic plan. You can be in the $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 depending on a whole lot of different components. So it can be, what actually are you asking your strategic plan consultant to do? Are you just having them come in and facilitate a retreat and give you feedback in a basic dashboard that you can use with your team, that your team is going to build out? Do you need to have someone do the facilitation, but then also have help you build out like task lists and deadlines and kind of work on that? Or do you need someone that's going to help with ongoing kind of like coaching and implementation strategies? So that budget really kind of could be all over the place. It really depends on what your organization needs. And obviously, if you have a budget, that's something that's good to share when you're actually pricing out what a strategic plan may cost. Okay, so we did put the SMART goals in the chat. So just wanted to let everyone know that that was there. Pre-work. I mentioned pre-work a couple different times, and I think to set yourself up for really good strategic planning success, it is a good idea to start to assemble, whether it's board committees, leadership teams, maybe kind of side work groups, maybe ad hoc committees that can start talking about some of the bigger initiatives that you want to work with. Obviously, great ideas come out of strategic planning sessions, but often the best ideas have really had some thought to them beforehand. So make sure that if you're going through this process, that you have done some of that pre-work and thinking, a little bit of thinking up front of, maybe it's, visioning, it's, pie in the sky, maybe it's just kind of notes, having brainstorming discussions, and then working with whoever is leading your sessions to be able to take that pre-work in, or knowing that you're going to talk about a particular topic and making sure that you know why you have certain people that are going to be in the room, or gathering information, or maybe it's surveying that you need to do with your constituents or your patrons or patients to get you the information that you need. So there is a little bit of pre-work that needs to get done before you actually even start putting a pen to paper. Also, making sure you define success. And I'm kind of blown away by, when I ask people, like, what does success look like? And a lot of people look at me and they just like, I don't know what success looks like. Before you have a strategic plan, I think you need to know, like, what if you were to accomplish all of this, what would it mean? And it could be a variety of things. It could mean that we're financially stable. It could mean that we serve more people. It means that our team is finally aligned the way we want them to be. We finally have a fundraising program that is going to allow us to do things we never thought about before. Defining what success looks like to you will actually be super helpful before you even get started. So how do you then get to the finish line? So we talked about how do you get started on this whole process? How do you actually get to the end? So I've mentioned a couple of times creating the accountability structure. And when I talk about having the accountability structure, I'm talking about, who's the lead, who are the team members, what is it that you actually want these people to do, who's assigned or who else needs to be involved maybe, and when is it due. So the more you can talk about accountability, the more that you can assign it, the more you can define it, the much better chance you have at success. We also suggest reviewing your plan regularly. So this can happen in a variety of ways. It could be something maybe you talk about at every staff meeting. Maybe the strategic goals for that particular period are on your staff meeting agenda, so they're in front of people all the time. Maybe you have a quarterly planning retreat where you go over everything with everybody. Maybe you have a monthly staff meeting or an internal newsletter. Any way that you review your plan and you're getting out to people, the better off you're going to be, because not only does it keep it front and center in front of them, it keeps it front and center for you. If your job is to actually lead that charge, because again, it's also easy for leaders to push things aside too and really work with what is so emergent. This is a good way, if you put it on your calendar, to make sure you have a regular cadence that'll be helpful. Manage your goals effectively. I talked about this, about setting realistic deadlines. A great way to do this is to actually break things down into 90-day increments. We're big fans here of a methodology called the Entrepreneur Operating System. It's actually in a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. And actually, Sarah, if you could put that in the chat, that would be really helpful. It's really a great way to start to break things down into 90-day increments. It's a lot easier to see 3 months from now what you have to do between now and then than it is to try to figure out what you have to do 3 years from now, or what to do even a year from now. So making sure that you're managing your goals effectively and breaking them down into smaller increments is really helpful. That way, it is then also easier to integrate those goals and objectives in your annual plan. So really, again, it's a way to keep everything in front of people all the time. Also involve your board. I think the board, I think we all have this misconception that boards think about our organizations every minute of the day like we do, when in fact that boards, unless they're communicated to regularly, often will think about you maybe a day before the board meeting and maybe for a little time after, and maybe some volunteer opportunities. But involving your board is going to take regular communication and constant communication. And I'm not hating on board members. I'm a board member myself, but when I find the organizations who stay in front of me and who communicate with me regularly, those are the ones I stay engaged with. So, give your board responsibilities, communicate with them regularly. If they have expertise in a particular area, put them on one of those ad hoc committees or one of those teams. They're going to be able to bring often a lot of experience that is going to be really beneficial to you and also to the people that they work with. And it's a great opportunity, especially if you're involving maybe younger leaders or people who are new to a particular role. It'd be a great way for them to learn from somebody outside of the organization who may have a different way of thinking too, and might be really helpful professional development. And then celebrate your achievements. I think that nonprofits often are so busy, and that, I guess I'll go back to that wash cycle of rinse, repeat, all of those. I don't think we take time to celebrate. We work really hard. I mean, all of you work really hard. You do so many good things for the community, but it just seems like there's so many demands on everybody's time in the nonprofit sector that you don't often just take time to say like, wow, we did a really good job. This is something that you can do regularly. Maybe you have a celebration. It doesn't have to be difficult. It could be an email from the, CEO once a month, or the board chair just saying, thank you, all of you. We accomplished another one of our strategic initiatives today. Or it could be maybe a mid-year celebration where you just order some pizza and drinks and, just have a quick lunch to just say, hey, you know what, everybody's worked really hard. I just want to say thank you. But celebrate those achievements, because when people feel as though they're appreciated, they're going to give you a lot more. And they're going to want to make these other goals realities as well. So things to avoid. So those are the things that you should do. These are some things that you don't want to do. So you want to avoid not making changes to the plan. So if you have something in your plan that no longer serves you, feel free to change it. It's your plan. Don't feel like you're beholden to it because it's written down and it's been approved by the board and everything. If it's not serving you and it doesn't do what you need it to do, get rid of it and make changes. Do not limit your plan to your leadership and to just your board. Make sure that that plan is known about and shared with everybody. We've talked about that a couple of times already. There's an easy way to do it without getting everybody into the weeds, but make sure it's a regular part of your discussion. Don't try to accomplish too much at once. I've said it a couple of times already also, is that you may get really excited at the beginning. You want to do everything and you want to accomplish everything, especially if you're a list checker. You want to get all that stuff done. Just don't burn yourself out by trying to accomplish everything in a short period of time. Pace it. Set those 90-day, goals. What can we accomplish now? What can we accomplish within this period of time? You're going to feel a lot better long-term, and you're going to have a much better chance of getting everything done that you want to get done. Not viewing the plan regularly, we already talked about that. So regular review is critical. Maybe even put it on your calendar once a month to say, okay, I'm just going to take this plan. I'm going to sit with it for a while, see where we are, and report back. Treating the plan separately from your annual plan. These things have to be integrated since it's the bridge between your long-range vision and your annual plan. They have to work together so that people understand where everything fits. Having loose accountability. One of the things that we found when we started using Traction and setting some of these 90-day increments is that we would assign too many people for being the lead or responsible. And that accountability was a little loose because people didn't understand, like, well, am I in charge? Should I be doing this? Should I be setting this meeting up? Should I make sure that your accountability structure is very, very, very defined and that there is no question who's responsible for doing what. And I would say too, if keep in mind other responsibilities that people have. Just because a person may be a great fit for a particular task or function within your strategic plan, look at their current job responsibilities. Do you actually need to take some things away from them in order for them to accomplish this, or do you need to reassign things, or do they actually need help? So make sure that accountability is also fair and not just very, very firm. And then not celebrating your success. You might only be celebrating your success in your board meetings, and that's really not fair to the people who may be really critical to having your strategic plan and doing all your strategic plan. So in the next few minutes, I want to review, and then I do want to answer some questions that you might have. So what you really need to know. And I think if I were to say, if you're preparing for your strategic plan right now, these things are the big highlights. They're a bridge between your annual and long-range plans. So, a long-range plan, again, is your vision. Where do you want to be? What do you aspire to be? What would be, the best version of your organization 5-10 years down the road? The strategic plan takes that and takes part of that, and it takes part of your annual plans, and it tries to get you closer to that 10-year vision. Clear goals and accountability are critical. You can't have murky goals. You can't have murky objectives. You can't have wishy-washy accountability. Those are non-negotiables. They have to be very well defined. Your plan isn't static. It's not something that you just make, it's done, and you shelve it. Make sure that it's a living, breathing document. You're talking about it, you're living it, you're using it, and everybody's aware of it. Make sure the right people are involved. That is different for every single organization. And again, the people that you involved 3 years ago may be the difference in the people you involve this year if you're going through the strategic planning process. Know what you want and need from your plan. And I think that this is something that is sometimes lost with organizations who are doing this, is that they don't really understand why they're doing a strategic plan or what they hope to get out of it. They just figure, oh, we should do a strategic plan because somebody said we should, or we did a strategic plan 3 years ago, so it's time for us to do one now. Know actually why you're doing it. Do you have, if your vision is not quite clear, maybe that's part of what your strategic planning process is like figuring out like, where do we want to be in 10 years? Maybe it's, we've had just a lot of challenges with staffing. Maybe, you're like, gosh, we got to do some things to really help with our culture, or we are in a space now that may be irrelevant in 5 years or 10 years. How do we pivot? And so going into this process, make sure that you do have some really, really frank discussions about what you need and what you want from your plan and what you want from the process. Everyone in your organization is responsible for the plan, whether they really know it or not. And that's, and depending on what your goals and your initiatives are, that's going to look, again, different for each organization, but everyone's responsible at some level, whether they know it or not. And no matter how small of a role someone plays, I think they need to be aware of what that role is. They need to be given some latitude to contribute, and they also need to be shown appreciation for their role in the plan's success. And then celebrate that success, whether it's monthly, whether it's quarterly, semi-annually, annually, and definitely at the end, share that success with others, because, as you go along, it's when you celebrate success, especially right now, there's hiring is tough. People are talking about culture and things like that. If people feel appreciated, that's really going to help you organizationally as well. It's going to get you the best board members. It's going to get you the best team members, and everybody is going to move in the same direction with your organization. So in the last 9 minutes that we have, I wanted to address the questions that were sent in ahead of time. And please, would love everybody to put your particular questions in the Q&A or the chat, because I'm be very happy to answer those at that time. So what can you do to prepare a tired COVID team when trying to renew and build a meaningful strategic plan? I think anytime you're working with a group who is tired and feeling maybe kind of beaten down, I think the first thing you need to do is listen to kind of how they're feeling. I think you need to take that into any kind of consideration as you're going into the planning process. I think people want to be heard. I think a lot of people are really tired right now, and the thought of embarking upon another big thing that they have to do is probably kind of scary. Maybe listen to their concerns, understand how they're feeling, but at the same time, maybe try to educate them on the importance of learning how and why that tiredness is occurring. Maybe there's some opportunities in there to say, like, I would really appreciate your feedback and maybe helping us frame some things, because maybe if we were to change some things or do something differently, this wouldn't happen to somebody else. So I think a lot of people are tired right now, and listening and being empathetic is probably the best thing that you can do, and talking about how can we maybe use what we've learned to move forward is a good approach with that. Also too, I think that if people have been had to think strategically a lot because of the pandemic, and there's a lot of that mindset, that if you can somehow leverage that empathy with the strategic thinking mindset right now, you're probably going to get a lot of really good bang for your buck. Or you may just want to say, like, maybe we wait 6 months and we decide, like, we're just going to kind of get everybody a break and let them reset and recalibrate, and we're going to get better thinking out of it in the long run. All right, so another question is how to get a board used to engaging in generative thinking when that has not been their normal mode of operation. So I think this is probably a point where there needs to be education. And I think a lot of times when boards aren't operating at the level you'd like them to, it's because maybe they have not had some of the education that would be helpful to them. If they were to maybe be aware of their role as a board member, or they don't understand what strategic thinking really looks like, or maybe the onboarding process within the organization wasn't quite as clear. Maybe you don't have term limits and you have the same board members that have been in place for a really long time. There might be some opportunities from an educational standpoint to be able to help get them out of that. Because I think everybody can think strategically. It's just sometimes they need to be nurtured. And that may be, again, a benefit of having an outside facilitator come in and do some pre-work with those individuals to maybe get them thinking a little differently before you get them into a session. All right, we do have another question in the chat. So yes, this presentation will be available online. We will send out something out to everyone, so you actually will get the video. And all of our .org Solutions webinars, our coffee shop webinars, are on our .org Solutions YouTube channel, so you can go actually back and look at past webinars as well. So we only have about 4 minutes left, and I know there was one question that was specific to religious organizations and churches. I'm not going to have time to actually answer that question right now. I do think a lot of the things we talked about today are relevant to organizations at all levels, whether you are an arts organization or religious organization, healthcare organization, social service, education, any of those kinds of organizations. So I apologize, I could probably talk for hours how, on each specific area and how you could benefit. So unfortunately, we're going to be able to address that question today, so I apologize for that. So in the last a couple minutes that we have here, I do want to tell you about our coffee shop webinars. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we do have our entire series on strategic planning. So today was just kind of getting started, or we're going to go a little more in depth in the next couple of sessions. We're going to be talking actually with a panelist who we're securing right now about how do you engage your team in the strategic planning process. So we're going to talk a lot more about, selecting the team members, how do you get them involved, things like that. So we're going to dive a little deeper into that in that next session. That's going to be on March 22nd. On April 19th, we're going to talk about 5 key things to include in your strategic plan. So those things that we actually discussed really at high level today, we're going to really talk about those in a lot more detail in April. And then in May, on May 42nd, oh my gosh, we added a couple days to May here, are keeping our strategic plan front and center, implementing an accountability. So we'll talk a lot more about how to do that accountability structure. Actually, we'll share some grids and things like that we actually use here, so that those upcoming sessions will have a lot more detail about the things that we talked about today. So again, if you're interested in registering for those, you can go to .orgsolutions.com/learning. That way you can actually get access to our past webinars, but also you can register for any of these other webinars. And then also you can go there to sign up for our monthly newsletter. That also has a lot of information. We have a lot of blogs that we send out on a regular basis, a lot of free learning for the nonprofit sector, which we hope you can take advantage of. So thank you so much for joining us today. I could talk about strategic planning for hours. There's a lot that goes into it, but hopefully in this hour that we had today, we were able to give you some good information to at least get you thinking about your strategic plan and how you can get started. If you do have any questions about strategic planning or something that you're interested in learning more about our services, you can contact me at amy@orgsolutions.com, or you can actually just go to our website and learn more about our strategic planning services and email us from there. So again, thank you for attending. We hope that you can join us on future webinars, and look for the version, actually the audio and slides for this particular version will actually be coming out within the next day or two. So have a great day, everybody. Happy again to 2222, and best wishes for much success.